Hey there folks. So in our videos so far we've been walking around and setting up all the logic that we need in order to understand paper ZD. We have a character that's attacking. We haven't done any attack effects and damage and hits and things like that just yet. We haven't really got any AI or enemies for us to fight up against, but we've covered pretty much most of the paper ZD content that does exist. So all of the kind of things that the paper ZD plugin added, we've covered those. Now, in terms of the paper 2D content, there's still just a little bit that we really want to go back and just finish off with those. And the first one, the main one that we're going to really look at with this, is the fact that if we go into our kind of sections, paper ZD, we've covered these three here. And if we look at that paper 2D, we've covered flipbooks and sprites, but we haven't covered tile maps and tile sets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start putting together some simple kind of example levels that take us from this really boring kind of debug default kind of cube area and start leaning us now a little bit more towards having playable game levels that are made using 2D tile maps and tile sets. So what I've done here is I've just created a folder called environment, and I'm just going to put in a new folder here called textures, just so I can keep all of these in the right place. I'm going to add in my texture file, and I'll just drag it into here and I'll put it in the right folder in a moment. So let me just move this to a place where I can actually get access to it and use it. Here we go. There we go. I can drag it in just like we would import any of a texture file. And the first thing that we're going to notice is that if we zoom in, look at how blurry that is. Super duper blurry. And that's because it's obviously being used with the exact same kind of settings that would be applied if this was going to be used in the game world on surfaces. So what I really want to do here, I'm just going to close down all these extra things for now. What I really want to do here is just first of all, sprite actions, apply paper 2D texture settings. And you can see we get the opacity from my background. Not every tile set's going to have opacity backgrounds, but I do here, and I can go into this and look at that now where every single one of those pixels is way more defined. You'll also see that this is obviously having a little bit of opacity through some of these lights, and that's maybe something that we just need to keep in a notice of in a moment. Now, how would we go about building our world? What we definitely don't want to do, and I'm just going to show you something just so we can go, let's not do that. What we might want to do is go, well, do we extract it? But look at that. Look at all these tiny little marks, all these tiny little things. And could you imagine, like, you might do this with 3D. You might put together loads and loads of modular pieces, but could you imagine having to do that with each of these? Especially as this piece, if I made this as a sprite, that's how big that piece is. I couldn't make this a really long barrier. I couldn't reuse these elements as much as I want or hang these out. So this is where what we're going to do instead with our tile sets. So I'm going to drag this one into my my textures folder. I'm going to create now a tile set from this. Now, how do we do that? Well, we're going to right click, and you can see here we have this option for create tile set. So what that'll do is it'll create us a tile set actor or asset from this selected text. Now you can go to here, paper 2D, create a tile set, and then manually apply the texture. But it's often just easier to go to the texture and create it ourselves. Now I probably want to do a little bit of renaming on some of these things. So this will be texture, and we'll go with, it's going to be dark tiles. I don't think there's anything else I need in here. This is tile set. Oh, no background. There is another version of this with a background. So I'll just put in that in the name, just in case I do use the other one. And knowing that that is now this one, what I like to do is I like to put these in, maybe go with tile set, but I do like to put in tile set just into my names, just so I can remember for myself. Okay, let's open this up and let's have a look at what this actually looks like. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice is I've got a very, very black, very dark tile map, and it's quite hard to see it because the default here is this dark blue. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to fix that, because once that's fixed, it's just going to be a little bit easier for me to actually read through all this and explain to you what is actually here. So the first thing, just change this background color. A very light value could be very useful. So you can see here, I can go for something like a light gray. Or something that contrasts with what we're already doing. So this is desaturated. It's very kind of, whites, greys and blacks. So a little bit of colour is going to mean this is much easier for me to see, but a lighter colour and a little bit less desaturated just becomes a little bit easier for us to work with. Something that's really dark like that, it's just going to be impossible to work out what the content is. So hopefully that's a little bit more visible for you guys. And now what we can do is we can look at what we've got here. And we're going to cover these in individual videos to go through them. But up at the top, you can see we've got the options for basically looking at the collisions of our tiles. Here we've got the actual texture itself, and this is where we can start clicking on the individual bits and defining what is an individual tile on its own. Over here we've got this preview, so this is our single tile editor. So I want you to just watch as I click on something how it shows up on there what is inside of that square. And you can see obviously these numbers are not correct because I've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that from down there. That's definitely not what we want, especially if we look over here. And down in the bottom right we've got the details panel that goes through for the whole tile sheet. Now you can see that my tile size here is set to 32 by 32, and that means that every time I left click into here, it's basically creating me a grid of 32 by 32, or a square of 32 by 32, and anything pixel wise that is inside of that is what is being included in that tile. Now, easy one for me to work with here is the fact that this has got 2 cubes up here. And if there's 2 cubes and they're both perfectly fitting in the 32 by 32, that suggests to me that 16 by 16 would be a much more appropriate tile size. Sometimes your artists are going to let you know. Sometimes you are going to need to define that for yourself and say, this is the tile size that we are working with, and every single tile should be working on that. You don't really want to mix too many tile sizes. The only reason you would want to mix tile sizes is if you had a main tile size and then like kind of decorative tile size. So you might set up an 8 and a 16, just so that then if you made your level an 8, the 16s would take up twice the amount of the space, but it gives you a little bit of options for whether things match up perfectly or whether they can slightly overlap. And I'll show you that in a future video. It's something that Siege and the Sandfox do incredibly well, using the tile maps to create really detailed, repetitive levels. But for now, 16 by 16, you can see my tile sheet texture is linked here, and this is where if you created the tile set yourself, you could then load in and define which texture. There are additional textures, we won't look at those right now. Border margin, you can see that adding this in, and I'm just going to select this one up in the top left, you can see that adding this in basically pushes this over. Yeah, so you can see that this is great if maybe your artist has added in a little bit of bleed area around the side of tiles. Maybe there is a border around the texture around the image, and we can do the exact same on our per tile spacing. So if I add a big gap here with this 4, what you'll see is that this one, perfect, but the next one, there's a gap of 4 in between these. And again, it's where maybe your artist has created a tile set with a bit of a border in between for the kind of bleed between 2 different ones. Not so much of an issue with any of my ones here, because this black to black, I've got no problem with the 2 black bits meeting up here, because they're going to connect up and be used as continuous ones. So for now, this is all we really need to worry about this. In a future video, we're going to look at how to add some collisions to these and how to start making our levels out of them. But for now, I just want you to load this up, get it set up in the tile set, and just make sure that you've got each of the individual tiles at the right size. Yeah, and if you go on things like itch.io, go on the free assets, you will find an absolute abundance of really awesome, amazing kind of world building asset packs that have loads of tile sets in them. The things that I've been looking at with these Dark Series ones, there's also all the ones that go alongside. Things like my Tiny Swords pack here. So if you look at my Tiny Swords pack, I've got this environment section here with the different tile sets, and you can see I've already created the tile sets from these. So in here, you can see I've got the 3 different sections, and I can reuse these to make completely modular, reusable sections for the corners, tops, middles. Reuse those as much as I need. But that's what we're going to look at in a future video. We're going to come back in here and we're going to start using these to make levels and decorate them with. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.